First off, welcome to our self-publishing poetry panel. Thank you for joining us right now. Today we have Spring and we have Lisa. So we're going to talk a little bit about poetry. So if you have any thoughts, questions, let me know. I will take your questions and your thoughts. We have some things to go through. So first off, I'm going to have you tell me your name. Tell me what kind of poetry you write or anything about poetry you wish to share, like right off the bat, where you're driving from, and then I have my special icebreaker question for you. So, that is, if you were a muffin, what kind of muffin would you be, and why?
Oh, I'd be chocolate chip all the way. If I were a muffin, I'd be chocolate chip.
We've got a lot of chocolate chip answers. Okay, well, that sounds like you're ready, so we'll start you off. So, give me your name, type of poetry, where you're from.
Okay, my name is Lisa Martinez. I'm originally from Houston, Texas, but I live here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area now. So my poetry is just, it rhymes, it's haiku, it's all different types of prose. It basically is just a snapshot of some of my life and some of the people that I've been around. So I write poetry based on what I see or what I know.
Okay.
My name is Spring Coleman, and if I were a muffin, I would be a banana nut muffin.
Love it.
And my poetry is more based on my life. It's different sections. I started writing when I was in 7th grade because I lost my grandma. And she's the reason that I started writing because that's how I coped with her death. And so this is for a young adult, but it has grief, it talks about love, loss, hope, and just everything you could think of an emotion that you go through is probably in this book.
Well, excellent.
And I am from Mineola, Texas, but I live in the DFW area. So.
Even better. So, I got a lot of DFW up here. So, I guess we're going to start off with one that you already touched on, but you can elaborate if you'd like. So that is going to be what drew you to poetry?
For me, poetry is like a song. It's a song of my soul or my heart. So I put a lot of feeling into what I write, and especially when I read poetry, it speaks to my soul. So that is pretty much what inspired me.
My grandma's death is how I started writing, but like you said, poetry is a song. I love listening to music and breaking down the lyrics. And so for me, this is kind of like breaking down my life and things that, like life events that have happened, like you think you would process them like at the moment, but I like to like think about it and kind of, in a way, write not a song about it, but it's very personified and it just paints a pretty picture of ugly things in life. So.
Great answers. People going strong. So, did you always want to publish, and what started you on that part of your journey?
So I had a goal of publishing by the time I was turned 50. I turned 50 in 2021, and my birthday came around, and I still hadn't published. So I said, I better get on this. So the very next month, I published my book.
That's awesome. So I have always had the dream of publishing my own book, and I honestly didn't ever think it would happen. And about 2 years ago, I reached out to publishers trying to get a feel for just everything, and I really didn't connect with anybody. And I was like, I don't want to do it this way. I want to do it my way and when I'm ready. So I waited about a year, and I picked up my manuscript and I started editing it again. And I kind of just started having ideas flow, and within about a month, maybe 2, I had the cover designed the way I wanted it to, and then I had the format of how I wanted my book to be.
Excellent. Nice. Okay. And so we'll scoot into more of like the nitty-gritty side of it, and then we'll go into the fun side. So what did you know about self-publishing before the beginning of your research process, or even before that? So what did you know about it before researching it seriously?
So self-publishing, I knew nothing. I actually saw a Facebook post that someone had shared, and they said their grandfather self-published a book on Amazon, and that he was selling his book, and I said, let me look into that, and that's exactly what I did.
So Ruby Kaur is a highly sought out poet. She's young, she's probably about 24, and I love her work. And I was researching, I knew nothing about self-publishing either, and I was researching how do you how you self-publish a book, and I found Amazon, and I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory when you're creating your book, and after that, I just ran with it, and if I made errors, I could fix it, but I knew nothing either, so.
That is fair. Okay, so now the fun part. The more fluffy part. So, how did you go about creating your collections, like your manuscript? How did you curate it? How did you go from ideas to get to where it is now?
So for me, my book is, it's kind of all over the place. It has different topics and it covers different subjects, and that's pretty much reflective of my life. So I just kept that theme and put a little bit of everything in the book.
I had all of my poetry. I didn't have it in a section at all, and it's divided into 6 sections, but I was reading it and I kept seeing different themes throughout different pieces of work, and so I would piece them together slowly until I had enough for each section. And then when I had my sections pieced together, I was like, okay, like what is this about? What am I getting from it? And how can I connect on a personal note with the reader without it being a poem? And so in my work, they're like little, not love letters, but it's a letter, to the reader about what the section's about.
Nice, excellent. Okay, and then we have a general. If you could give one piece of advice to a new writer or new poet specifically, looking to self-publish, what would you give them as your advice?
My advice would be just do it. Don't let anything hold you back. Don't worry about whether it will sell or whether it will not. Just follow your heart. Do what's in your heart.
My advice would be to never give up on your dream. And even though it is it's not easy to self-publish. You have to figure out a lot yourself. But just keep going and you'll eventually get there.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so next thing we'll do is about your journey. So, what was the most exciting, fantastic part of your journey to self-publishing, and what was a more difficult part of it?
So the most exciting part definitely was seeing the finished product and actually having people buy it. That was just amazing. I never take that for granted. The most challenging part was designing it, trying to decide how I wanted it to look and what I thought would be the best fit for what I had, picking the poems and things of that nature. So it took a little work.
So I actually published my book right before Mother's Day, and I gave it to my mom as a present because nobody knew that I was writing this book. I kind of did it in secret because I was afraid that if I told everybody, they would have this high expectation, and I didn't want to let anybody down. So it was more fun to surprise people. But the most exciting part was getting to see it and have people buy it. But the difficult side was nobody tells you what size your book should be, and I had done mine really big without knowing it, and so the first copy that I got in the mail, I was so distraught because it was my mistake, and luckily I got to fix it, and so it's a learning process, and that was one of the harder parts because I was like, this doesn't look like a book, and I figured out how to fix it, and but the cool thing is that seeing everybody read it and have people reach out to me and actually say that my words mean something to them is pretty cool.
Excellent. Okay, so on the topic of somebody else reading your poetry, we have a question from Miss Bob right in the back. She's already forgotten her question. So, her question was, have you ever heard someone read your poetry out loud? And how did it align with your intentions when you were writing the piece?
I have heard people read my poems, and it's interesting how people can view things differently from the way that you intended them to be, but it's all good. You know, it's all about interpretation, and just the fact that they wanted to read it and they felt something when they read it was amazing.
I have heard people read my poetry, and the cool thing about poetry is that it can mean something to you, something completely different, and they can relate to it on a different level. And so I've heard some of my friends read it, and just hearing them read it was super cool, and just to hear their different point of view from it. And you know, sometimes words are what save people, just like music is. And so to have somebody relate to just deep parts of my life is pretty cool.
Sounds excellent. Okay, so last little bit is going to be kind of whatever you would like to touch on that I haven't come up with a question for. So any part of poetry, your process, anything that informs it, how you get ideas, whatever you'd like to talk about, this is your time.
I mean, I just think that thank you for being a part of this panel and coming. It's really important to support the arts, and you know, it's just amazing. Thank you to the Watauga Public Library for doing this, and everything can be an inspiration, everything, so it's amazing.
Thank you for sitting on this and just listening, because that's how we get to connect with you guys. And is it cool if I like read it? Like a part from my book?
Whatever you'd like to read.
Okay, so like I said, it touches on different subjects, but to actually hear it, I think would be cool. This is about grief, but this is how each section opens. So it says, "To those who have lost a loved one, they say time heals all, but what I've found to be true is that time creates space between the initial wound. The wound has left a scar. It does not bleed, it just creates a phantom limb. I tend to find myself falling back into when they were here. It is like I dreamt and forgot the pain of living in a nightmare. These poems are in memory of Janice Elaine Pruitt and Jerry Allen Wilson. These poems are for the one whose phantom limb still thinks they are there to create a space in between the living and the dead."
Would you like to read a poem?
Oh, sure.
Whatever your heart wants.
This is called I Remain. I don't consider myself weak in many areas of life, yet knowing what I know, why do I remain your wife? Why do I keep your name? Why do I accept the pain? You're not just cheating me, I cheat myself by remaining while you're with someone else. We can never be the same, so why do I remain? I picture myself starting over. I know if I try, I can. I've never been the type to define herself by having a man. Why won't I reach for the door? Why don't I respect myself more? In my heart, I know you don't love me. I fool myself by accepting your dishonesty. You and I will never be the same, so why do I remain? And actually, that poem was written because my brother and sister-in-law were having marital issues. So that was just something that I wrote for her.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to our very intimate audience. What would you like to ask our audience? If anything? Any other question?
When you are writing poetry in general, especially the more structured poems like a haiku, do you write directly into that form, or do you write what you want and then put it and then edit it into that form?
It's interesting you chose haiku because I do have one in there, and I wrote it specifically in that format when I did mine.
When I write, I just kind of let it flow, and then when I see what format it fits best in, that's kind of how I do mine.
Okay. We'll open it up a couple more seconds. Any other questions? Any other thoughts?
I can't think of anything. You already asked my question.
I know, I'm sorry. Ask Barbara's question. She'll let her ask her question. Okay.
I'll ask one more then.
Sure, yeah.
Why poetry instead of prose or song lyrics, or why specifically poetry?
For me, poetry is it really does come natural to me. I'm always rhyming in my head, and I'm not very, I can sing, but I don't know how to read or write music, so that's more why I chose poetry.
like she said earlier, poetry is like a song. When you think about it, like lyrics are a poem without music. And so I can highly relate to music. And I like to, when I write, I like to listen to music. And so I think just being able to relate, kind of, I can't sing, I'm obviously not a songwriter, but I can write poetry and I can create a level to be on literary with everybody else. But it's always just flowed naturally. And even, I think I'm the only one in my family like that actually writes, and it just comes naturally because I've heard people say, "Oh, you're a good writer," in school, and I was like, "Yeah, they're just saying it." And so then, when I actually was confident enough to share my work with people, they're like, "No, like you can actually write." So that's cool, knowing going forward, because sometimes people they just give you sunshine, and I want to hear everything else too. So.
Excellent. Okay, so thank you guys for joining us. I greatly appreciate it. So they can find your poetry collections on Amazon and websites.
Yeah, mine is on Amazon, yes.
Mine's on Amazon too, and I have little business cards that have the QR code on the back.
Excellent. And then, so we have Amazon, and then also we have the library's copies, which are what's on display right now. So we'll be here in all of our other locations. So, with that being said, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.